respectively, and he held the position as Prime Minister until he was elected as future NATO Secretary General at the Strasbourg Summit in April 2009. During the Danish presidency of the European Union, from July to December 2002, Mr. Rasmussen played a key role in the process leading to conclusion of the accession negotiations with 10 candidates for EU membership at the meeting of the European Council in Copenhagen in December 2002. Last but not least, Mr. Rasmussen is married to Mrs. Annette Rasmussen. They have 3 children. And I'm delighted to add, in his spare time, he is a passionate runner, and he also enjoys cycling and kayaking. In our institute, incidentally, we like to recall that sport is a crucial element in a gentleman's education. Mr. Rasmussen, thank you very much for coming to the Catholic University. It is now my great privilege to give you the floor. Thank you.
Indeed. Really appreciate it. Because otherwise I can't have my manuscript here. Can you find it? Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Braga de Cruz, Dr. Espada, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I should like to start by thanking Dr. Braga de Cruz and Dr. Espada for having invited me to speak to you today at an institution such committed to the transatlantic alliance. Last week I visited Bastogne. Maybe you don't know the name of that small town, but it is a small Belgian city near the border of Luxembourg. It is a place where in 1944 the so-called Battle of the Bulge took place, one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. Thousands lost their lives, but the American troops ultimately prevailed, and their success hastened the end of the war in Europe. And I can tell you that it was moving to see the graves, the memorials, and the sites where young soldiers at the same age as of you, the students here today, where young soldiers at your age fought each other just about 65 years ago, and many of them paid the ultimate price. And this was the second time in the 20th century that Americans and Canadians crossed the Atlantic in order to help liberate Europe. 30 years earlier, American and Canadian soldiers had been fighting in the First World War. After that war had been won, America and Canada quickly went home. Yet, just one generation later, they had to return because Europe proved unable to find a sustainable balance between its major powers. So, the Second World War finally brought home what the First World War should already have taught us. The security of Europe and North America is indivisible. Instability and insecurity on one side of the Atlantic will inevitably affect the other side of the big pond. This historical lesson is the reason why visionary politicians on both sides of the Atlantic created NATO in 1949. From now on, North America and Europe would organize their security together. the founding members of NATO, including Portugal, vowed to consider an attack on one as an attack on all. This promise, enshrined in Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, is the strongest commitment that sovereign nations can make towards one another. The lesson of transatlantic security cooperation was complemented by a second, equally important lesson: the need for European integration. If Europe was to become truly safe and secure, the countries of Europe had to put their petty rivalries aside and work towards a shared goal of economic and political integration. This twin lesson of transatlantic security and European integration has brought spectacular dividends. Under NATO's security umbrella, the European integration process could flourish. The western part of our continent turned from a breeding ground of nationalism, rivalry, and war into a model of pluralism, prosperity, and peace. And when the Cold War ended, and the eastern half of Europe was finally able to make its own free choice as well, their choice